Welcome back to the Bourbon and BS podcast, everyone. This is part 2, Beyond the BS. We had some technical difficulties. Of course, it may not be on our end because we've got plenty of good speeds here. So hopefully the audio is good. If you're listening on the podcast apps, if you guys are listening live, this is the best we can do. We've had issues with StreamYard in the past, and this might be not on our end. So there's not a whole lot more we can do on the video. So hopefully you guys are enjoying the sound of our voices.
Everyone likes your voice. I don't know if you've heard that once or 1,000 times.
Once or twice. But we're going to push forward, and hopefully the video clears up. It's not on our end. We had plenty of upload speed when I did the tests. It's just, here we are. So let's get into it, guys. Part 1, we did the Black Maple Hill straight bourbon. So check back to part 1 if you guys are just listening to part 2. Did a review on that along with the New World Oscuro by AJ Fernandez. Those were the featured drink and smoke tonight in part 1. We've got the H. Upman Nicaragua. Has anyone lit that up yet? Or are we still on the first?
I think we're still on the first.
Still on the first?
Yeah.
I'll probably be the first to go on that one.
Yeah. Got Nate going to be lighting that up here soon. That's from Altus USA. We appreciate their support as always. And also Tinder Box at Easton for the New World Oscuro. And that's in Columbus, Ohio. Check them out. And BS Cigar Company as well. The gold and silver are available. And what sets us apart, I think, from a lot of the other podcasts out there, especially the cigars and the bourbon ones, is this is kind of, we try to bring another dimension to this community. And I encourage you guys to stay tuned. This is going to be some interesting conversation with Dallas Allen. We got AJ Kazmierzak back in the garage. Dallas was on about almost 2 years ago now. So good to have him back as well. And we hope you guys get something out of this. I'm interested in this topic here, but the topic tonight, and thank you guys on patreon.com/Bourbon and BS podcast, and also Venmo at Bourbon and BS. And if you like the shirts, buyjack.com/Bourbon and BS. And if you guys, we got some people tuning back in. So there's Ray. Make sure you guys share this again. I'm going to do that as we get started here. And once again, we apologize about the video quality, but the topic tonight is turning postvention into prevention. And a lot of you guys out there may think that postvention is not a word. Well, it's not necessarily a widely used term or word, but we're going to learn tonight that it is actually something that is going to be, I think, heard about more as we go forward. We hear a lot about mental health and things like that, you know, on the news. We've talked about it on the podcast. It's going on right now. We've had some incidents, you know, recently that even that gets turned into some sort of political thing. You know, we just had, unfortunately, another shooting in this country that is all over the news, and it's completely a tragic incident. And it immediately turns into, as we all know, into this whole thing of, you know, gun control versus mental issues and stuff like that. And then there's no right answer, and everything gets overlooked, in my opinion, and everything is lost because we can't agree upon the fact that there are several sides to issues. And I think that's something that I'm going to introduce Dallas here and kind of give us a little bit of what he gets into. It's not necessarily what's going on with the shootings, but again, with a lot of this, what is the cause of some tragic actions, whether it's to other people or to yourself. And I just want to kind of preface this, that keep an open mind in this conversation. And if you have any questions, please list them on the feed, and we'll try to get them answered by Dallas or by the panel or by you guys out there, the community. And without further ado, Dallas, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're doing, what's been going on since almost 2 years ago.
Yeah, for sure. So last time I was on here, we were kind of just talking about mental health as a whole. And I don't know if anyone who's tuning in now tuned in then, but I did talk about an individual that I, you know, knew pretty closely and worked with, who unfortunately died by suicide. And since that, I've had a passion related to doing something about what I think is, you know, a pandemic that our world is facing. I think suicide is an issue that needs to be talked about more. People don't, you know, necessarily like to talk about it or even research the topic just because it has a little bit of taboo within some people. But since that, you know, gaining that passion for suicide prevention, I have been blessed with an opportunity that at this point, no one else has. I am the first and only suicide investigation specialist in the nation. So my long-winded title is Suicide Investigations and Postvention Specialist. I am the first one ever to be based in a coroner's or a medical examiner's office, which gives me a unique perspective from other prevention specialists, as in I am working closely with the unfortunate population who do pass away from suicide. So typically what I do, it's a two-part type of job. So I do go to suspected suicide death scenes. I do investigate the death, but while I'm there and while I follow up, I'm doing a psychosocial history with individuals who have lost that loved one to suicide. So I'm really trying to determine some of the experiences of that individual and kind of what led them down this unfortunate road, taking that information and trying to turn it into intervention points that we can then turn into prevention as a community and make a impact on suicide fatality. So the information that I'm obtaining through the psychosocial interviews, I then present those on what is called a suicide fatality review. So I lead that within Franklin County. So I collaborate with a bunch of professionals and we talk about those issues and we try to make community action from it, make recommendations within those reviews, and have different agencies change the way they are approaching suicide and suicide prevention so we can make that ultimate impact. So that's my goal, is to make an impact on suicides in Franklin County, move that statewide, and then ultimately, if we can make these fatality reviews a bigger thing, we can then go ahead and make a nationwide impact on suicide fatalities.
So you said you're the first. Obviously, there are people that look into suicide deaths, right? I mean, police and probably other organizations as well, but you are the first that's working with a coroner's office, is what you said.
Correct. So there is
like, how does that differ, I guess, from what was going on prior to this new, call it a venture, or this new position that was created for you?
Yeah. So, I mean, there is many prevention specialists out there. There's a lot of different agencies that work to combat the issue with mental health and suicide. But what makes my position unique is that I'm working with a population that necessarily the prevention specialists don't get to see. I have access to data that they aren't able to see when it comes to the fatalities. So, such as that psychosocial history. So the stressors that may have led that individual for taking their own life. I'm learning that from family members, from friends, people who were close with those individuals. And so I'm really close to the actual suicide stressor. So that could be anything from, abuse history. That can be, relationship issues, educational issues, job related, physical pain. There's a lot of things that someone could go through that, makes them have those thoughts in their mind. And so having the access to that data is going to kind of fast track some of that stuff, because I'm able to take that data, share it with those prevention specialists who work for those companies and actually are out kind of on the front lines of things. And so being able to share that with them is going to allow them to improve the way that they're going about it. And so it's ultimately a collaborative effort, and it's going to make that ultimate impact in the end.
So we had a question here from Ray. How long has this been an actual role?
And I kind of answered that. So
for the listeners,
if I'm wrong, please correct me.
So my particular position, I started in July of 2021. So prior to that, it didn't exist, but the county coroner and Tony Coder, which is the executive director of OSPF, which is Ohio Suicide Prevention Foundation. They've both been very passionate about suicide prevention themselves. So they've had conversations like, what can we do about it? And so they were able to create a position such as mine. So since July of 2021, I have now interviewed well over 100 individuals who have unfortunately lost a loved one to suicide. So rather new, so pretty groundbreaking, pretty new in what I'm rolling out. So I'm still trying to improve different things and learn as I go as well. But yeah, so rather new, in July of 2021.
And to that point, something to keep in mind, and honestly, one of the only things that I'll be able to add to this conversation, just because I'm going to be learning the entire time as well, but something a lot of people need to understand is that Dallas and I were roommates in college, and even back in college, he knew like this is what he wanted to do. The position, I still remember us talking on the couch late night, you know, after a couple of drinks or whatever, and he knew like this is the area that he wanted to be in. This is what he wanted to do. And we talked about it, and I told him like, dude, hearing you speak, you're going to speak all over the country about this. And, you know, he just got back from a speaking engagement in St. Louis. While he was in St. Louis, he was offered other speaking engagements in different states as well. You know, the credibility is there. This kid, one of my best friends, knows what he's talking about when he speaks. So don't let what is this position? Barely less than a year. Don't let that fool you. He's been dealing with information and aspects regarding this since college, which unfortunately for us is getting a longer ways away.
A long way.
All right, calm down.
So you talk about Dallas wanted to, start talking about and wanting to do this kind of thing back in college. Are you able to talk about like what spurred you towards this? Was there something that happened, or was this just you saw
the friend?
You saw a need. Okay, I didn't remember that. So
yeah, I mean, I think it was a long thing for me. So me personally, I struggled, a little bit with depression and anxiety at times. So it kind of put me in that role early, and I've always kind of thought, well, what can I do for myself, but also what can I do for others? I spent a really long time working at a mental health residential facility for adolescent females. So this is individuals who have experienced, lifelong physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. So that really put me in a world of that mental health and those stressors that are very prevalent in youth, let alone everyone. So doing that and just really wanting to figure out how I can prevent something like this. I've talked about it when we got on here that I did lose someone that was close to me to suicide. So that also kind of heightened my desire to do something about it. I think there's people out there who have, lost loved ones who also have experienced that passion and want to talk about it. So me finally having a platform to do so and actually travel around and kind of have these conferences and speak about people who, unfortunately lost their lives to suicide, but I really want to show the world who those people were and that they weren't defined by their mental illness. So
I think that's the postvention part of it, right? So I do have a few questions here, and I had the question of what was going on prior to you taking this position. So if a suicide occurs, and obviously that turns into a crime scene, and they investigate and they rule it a suicide. Are you familiar with what is the common practice prior to this, what you're doing or what your mission is in this type of area? I mean, what was going on before? They ruled a suicide, and then what's the police follow-up? Were they interviewing family? Is that all part of a typical police investigation?
So, yeah, I mean, when a death happens, 911 is called. The police will respond. The firefighters and medics would ultimately pronounce the death. And then that is when the coroner's office is called for those types of deaths. So the coroner's statute is stating that the coroner is going to be involved in any unusual, sudden, violent death or anything like that. It's going to be a coroner's jurisdiction. So the coroner investigator, so I'm a part of the investigative unit, would respond to that scene. They investigate the death, and they would, before me, interview the family as well. But they, with their position, they only had so much that they can do in that time. So their interview was something that was happening on that day. And then they were just kind of, moving forward, unfortunately, to the next
case, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So with the advancement of my position, gives me the opportunity to dig a little bit more, get that information. I can follow up with families. I'm talking to them regularly. So I'm getting more information. So instead of it being that surface level investigation as it was prior, which I do assist in. Like I said, my job is a two-part, so I do the investigative part as well. But I'm able to follow up later as my caseload is a little smaller because I'm only specializing in those suicide deaths. So it's just being able to go a little bit more deeper than that surface level investigations, which makes this very different than what was happening before.
We had a question also, do you have access to historical medical information for the individuals?
Yes. So we do have, we send out subpoenas to request records from any mental health facility, any outlying hospital, any interaction that they've had, whether it be physical health or mental health. I do send subpoenas to those agencies and I receive the records. So I'm able to, see outside of what's being reported to me what that individual was going through, which gives me a little bit more availability to stressors that may not come through that interview, as I am relying on what that individual is sharing with me as if the family. So when I'm speaking with a family member, they are going to give me information, of course, but that medical record is going to give me that full 360 and maybe what they weren't able to share or didn't know, maybe, because it was only in their medical records.
Maybe didn't want to disclose at that time because it was just too fresh, too emotional.
Right.
Yeah. And just to kind of fill in the gap of what you actually have access to compared to what it used to be, let's just for the sake of argument, let's assume that this individual had no mental institution aspects, the family didn't know anything. This was super, super sudden. What are some aspects that you have at your disposal or some, I guess, what do you use to help you find out like this happened because X?
Yeah. So, I mean, interviewing the family it's depends on who you're speaking with. It can go, very different ways, but I think it comes with the way that I'm questioning, the flexibility in my questioning. I'm not necessarily just asking, was your loved one depressed? I'm being more flexible in that approach. And so I'm actually helping them realize some stressors that they might not have realized was a suicide stressor within that individual's life. So, asking different things like, have they been kind of withdrawing from the family, like maybe then that would open their eyes. They have been withdrawing a little bit in the last couple weeks or last couple months. So I guess just the way that I am questioning my family members, they're actually learning themselves of stressors that they didn't even know existed prior to my interview.
So
I'm loving all these questions.
Yeah, I am too, and I encourage you guys to share this. This is it's a fascinating conversation.
It's a conversation that needs to be had that a lot of people don't know about, which kind of leads to this question. I feel like.
So Ray's asking, at the risk of seeming a little insensitive, is there enough work to keep you busy if you only investigate suicides? And I will say that you're with Franklin County, which is Columbus, Ohio, and surrounding cities. We're looking at about 2 million people, I think, in the county, give or take. So decent size. So yeah, to that question.
So unfortunately, the answer is yes. I think this position was created within Franklin County because the issue was very prevalent. It was something needed to be done, as there are way too many suicide fatalities. And so the unfortunate answer is yes. I know you say you don't want to be insensitive, but yes, the numbers are pretty high at the time. We have a lot of issues that go into that. COVID-19 pandemic was really hard for a lot of individuals, which
Are numbers up?
They are up. So right now, and they are, if I'm remembering the data correctly, it is not something that's like a crazy amount, but they are up at this time. And like I said, they've been going up in the last couple of years, which has made this position needed. And so that's why I'm grateful that, the Franklin County Coroner and Tody Coder had those conversations because they saw the issue before this even existed and created this so we can actually do something about it. So
are you also, so you're investigating suicide deaths. Is there, obviously, even within Franklin County, there's going to be a lot of those. Is there a chance as this progresses that you would investigate suicide attempts? Because I was looking up some numbers on stuff, and so
I don't really know what my access would be to actually like previous non-fatal self-injury incidences.
Wouldn't go through the coroner's office.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
but
obviously, yeah.
Now that is a question that I am asking when I'm talking with family. Like, is this something that has been an ongoing issue? Did they have previous non-fatal self-injuries where they had, tried to take their own life? So that is something that I'm looking into because, having those previous non-fatal stuff is a red flag to future ones. And so it's definitely something that needs to be talked about. I think a lot of the previous stuff is going to be definitely on the prevention specialists, the different agencies that are kind of on the front lines of that. And so different counseling agencies, treatment facilities, those are going to be the ones that are really tackling those previous non-fatal self-injuries. But with that collaborative effort that I'm talking about, I'm talking with all of those agencies. And so we're sharing this information as it's kind of giving that whole 360, which I think is ultimately going to make the bigger impact in the long run.
Because the reason I asked that was when I was looking up some statistics right before we did this. So in 2020, there were almost 46,000 suicides in the U.S., but there was estimated 1.2 million attempts.
Sure.
So
you always
and
see
that's
that
right.
too,
Yeah, that
where
makes sense.
like, you know, it is like you'll hear people say, or, you know, society say, like, sometimes it is a cry for help, you know, especially if it's not it's a suicide attempt, but it's not like, I'm trying to be as not PG, but it's not like pointing a gun, you know, it's like hurting yourself or something like that. You know what I mean? But the attempts are obviously, it's important to look at and how you, but I don't think that's really, like you said, it's not really your area of expertise as of now. This is like unfortunately, the act has been accomplished and you don't have that person to talk to after the attempt. You don't have that line of questioning and be like, you know, why did you do this? What's going on? And then going through the counseling, maybe a facility. This is something that it's always, again, not to bring up like what happened down in Texas. It's those types of situations that you see all this stuff happen. The whole world, the whole country or whatever, let's start with the country, blows up over this. And they have these strong feelings about it. But it's like when the shooter in that case, whether they take their own life or they're taken out, and then you don't have that person to question anymore. That's what's so fascinating to me about this. And Nate, that's a really valid point. I'm just like, what's really different about it is that you've got someone like Dallas that you can have all the medical books, you can have all these therapists and, you know, the best of the world theorizing about this. But I mean, this is the I guess the groundwork, as far as like you're the one doing the grunt work really of getting this information when you don't have someone to talk to after the attempt, after the act of violence.
Unfortunately, the best source of that information, you can't.
That's my point. And so that's what's so unique and fascinating about what you're doing, Dallas. I mean,
right. And so that's ultimately, so like I'm in the realm of postvention and I'm working to change that to prevention, which is the title of part 2 here. So that information that I'm collecting, I'm then taking that to improve the efforts of people who are actually on the front lines with individuals who are suffering from mental illness or who do have suicidal ideation. So I'm trying to improve the way that we do interact with those individuals so we can prevent them from actually having a fatal, suicide incident. So I'm not particularly in that spot, but the data that I am collecting is being shared with those individuals so we can make that impact quicker, because that's the ultimate goal, is to have less of, suicides happening. And so I have to have them involved. And if we can improve the way that they are interacting with those individuals, we could save a lot of lives.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but that is literally the essence of why you just got back from St. Louis, Missouri, speaking at a conference. You came with notes about what steps we can take to make sure that more of these don't happen. And, that whole aspect of, you're not necessarily the one that's going to be able to interview the 1.2 million, but your information is what's going to help the people that are interviewing those.
Right. Yeah. And that's the thing too, is, so I am the only one at this time. I don't want that to be the case. I want there to be many more of me in counties within Ohio, within different states. I have some lofty goals when it comes to that. So I do like going to these conferences because I'm able to talk with other offices, other agencies that could partner and make a position such as mine. For like, if I'm just staying within Ohio, I feel like if there is specialists like me that pop up and say, Cuyahoga County, Madison County, different counties within Ohio, we then can create regional reviews in which the information that I'm collecting in Franklin County could be shared with Cuyahoga County, with Madison County. We're seeing the commonalities between those counties, we then can take that information and make a statewide impact on suicide fatalities. And then being even loftier than that, my ultimate goal is if those regional reviews can then match up with regional reviews from around the nation and then make a nationwide impact on suicide fatalities. So
what do you find? I mean, like, so you have a lot of notes, obviously. I mean, you talk to family members, they may or may not know something. This day and age, you have social media, right? And I would imagine that comes into play a little bit of, you know, trends of that. Yeah, right. Because there are some people that won't have any social media. They go silent on it prior to something like this. Do you look at trends? How far back do you go when you're looking at all this stuff? Because you have that experience. And the last time you were on, I think it was episode 125, you did speak on the facilities you were working with the young women. This, like, what is the, I guess, I don't want to say the line of questioning, but I mean, you're talking about it, I guess, more of a, you're not at treetop level, but you're doing kind of the general information on what you do. If we can dial down a little bit, what is the goal? So do we know like an average age of person that you investigate?
So the average, it is unfortunately all over. Okay. So I actually, that's something that I've seen a lot. So unfortunately, when I'm looking at my caseload, my youngest is 12 and my oldest is 85. Okay. So it is very stretched. But like for the elderly community, a lot of people feel like someone who is elderly could not die by suicide. So there's a lot of ageism in suicide. That's something that I'm trying to combat with. So I've actually, talked with different agencies within Franklin County who work with the elderly and tried to revamp the way that they're screening individuals so they can talk about mental health and talk about suicidal ideation, because those individuals come from a time where talking about mental health seems as a weakness to them. So it's not something that they're going to do. So we need to find ways that we can pull that information from them and help prevent that. That's definitely something that I'm talking with the fatality review. And like I said, I've brought in like the Office of Agings and I bring all those people in so I can revamp that with them, because they're on the front lines. They're working with those elderly. So they're able to make that change and hopefully prevent a suicide in that age population. But I don't have, for me, you'll see it a lot in, 20 to 40 something, but it's going to happen to everyone. I do know that, the at-risk population that mostly does die by suicide is going to be white males. That is an issue that we see. There's a lot of them. That's mostly what I'm seeing.
Why do you think that is? Based on obviously being an expert in this.
I would say a lot of it's access to lethal means. Okay. So they're going to be using methods of suicide that are very lethal compared to
firearms.
Correct. So firearms is going to be your most lethal. So that's going to be what I see mostly. But I think that's a big precursor on why it's going to fall within that white male range, is just because they are using lethal means more than not. So,
okay. What I'm asking though, also, so say you have the person in their 80s, right? I would assume the beginning of this, and kind of walk me through it if you would. Like the beginning of it is you talk to anyone close, and you talk about more recent times, like what would have led up to it, and you kind of work backwards, because that's just logical in my mind, right? But how far do you go, I guess? And I'm sure every case is different, whether they're 20, 40, 80, 12. I mean, do you do the whole, in a sense, if you had that person there, you try to counsel, right? You try to dive into their brain and their mental side of their health, as far as when did it all start. A lot of times these types of things, it could be something as directly associated with job loss, significant other loss, news on their health, something that might have changed in recent times, this isn't the person that we used to know.
Right.
And I would assume you work backwards. And sometimes do you go all the way? I'm fascinated and curious about how far back do you go in someone's life when you're doing this investigation? How many years back do you go back to? Was it a childhood trauma that then eventually was bottled up, and then at some point, whether it be triggered or it was just some sort of a a trauma that they dealt with, just flat out dealt with their whole life,
Mhm.
and then something happened, or just they something finally clicked in their mind that they couldn't take that trauma anymore.
Yeah.
How
So,
far back do you go?
so I am going back as far as possible. So the conversations with my families, I'm definitely going to talk about if there was some type of childhood trauma. That's definitely something that's going to, affect that individual mentally, and that's going to be a long haul thing. That's going to be something that affects them forever. So I do want to go back and learn about that. So when I'm speaking with families, I am starting from the beginning, and I'm trying to get as much information as possible. So I'm going to talk about childhood. I'm going to talk about their school life. I'm going to talk about jobs. I'm going to talk about physical health, mental health, any type of treatment that they've had their entire lives. That's all stuff that could have been red flags with that individual, could have been located early and maybe prevented that death. So I'm going to try to go back as far as possible for every decedent that I am looking into. And a lot of times it's going to be the family that's going to allow me to go that far. Medical records, I'm getting all of their medical records. So I'm going to have it very early.
Do you find there's a lack of medical records on a lot of individuals?
I do. I think that is something
like some of the symbols, they don't go to the doctor.
Right.
It's like, oh yeah, they did have, like, they had blood tests and then 7 years passed and this is the next doctor visit.
Yeah.
You talk about white males as being a predominant classification. Just from my viewpoint, Midwest white male myself, I know that there's a generation like my father's generation, and a lot even now, it's like, I'm sure it's a lot of people, but like white males, they don't go to the doctor unless they are like, they can't get up and like, yeah, no, I think this pain in my lower back on the right hand side it'll go away. It's fine. And then like finally, like they're sweating just talking to you and like getting up out of bed. They shower and they can barely get in and out of it. And like, I might need to go to the doctor.
Right.
It's like this. There's a mental block there that I'm not going to go see someone because of ego, because of just the way that they were raised. I'm not going to go talk to someone.
Ignoring that check engine light.
Yeah, you're a guy
mentally too.
Yeah, you're a guy. Tough it out. You're fine.
I think it probably goes into, and that's why I'm curious. I mean, with those mental the medical records, it's something that I feel as though, even with the stuff that we hear in the media, social media, all the memes about mental health, all the the posts on Instagram, and all the little blurbs you see after a tragic incident. We all talk about mental health, but actually going to see it, if you are that individual, is it something that again, in your experience so far in this occupation, have you seen that there's a trend of a lot of medical visits, that people that unfortunately commit suicide, that they had been seeing someone, or is it more common that they hadn't? And when you talk to families, we kind of knew, or like we talked about it, but that person would never go and actually talk to someone. So
I see that a lot more
latter.
than them actually going, which I think
assume that
goes back to the stigma that is there about mental health and suicide. I think when people are having feelings like that, or they're having thoughts like that, they are scared to really talk about it. They can be negatively labeled, or they feel like they'll be judged because they said that they're depressed, or they're not feeling 100% in their head. So that stigma makes them steer away from going to get some type of medical intervention or therapy. People don't want to be someone who goes sees a therapist, right? So that idea that's in our society that's a negative thing needs to go away. And I think that is education that our society has. So I talk about different like suicide gatekeeping training. So
said gatekeeping.
Yeah. So it's like a suicide gatekeeping treatment. And I'll go into it a little bit further. So I know I work really closely with Lost Community Services. They are a volunteer agency in which all of their volunteers have been negatively affected by suicide in some shape or form. So they put on these trainings and they're free. And I think that everyone in society should sit in one because it's going to teach you how to navigate a conversation related to mental health. It's going to help you persuade an individual to receive some type of treatment, to let them know that it's okay to not be okay, and that there's people out there that can help them with that. And so it's a two-part thing. You're educating yourself on how to navigate that question, because if I come to Kaz and I say, hey, I'm not feeling proper, I feel depressed. If he's not someone who is educated or wants to talk about that, he's going to clam up, and then that
you're fine, it's cool,
right,
it'll blow over.
Yeah, so me expressing that to him and then him saying something like that or clamming up himself and avoiding the conversation, that could have been my chance to get it out and then to get some type of treatment. So QPR is the training. And so I really suggest that everyone look that up and sit in one. So it's called Question, Persuade, and Refer. So you're going to learn how to question individuals who may be experiencing mental health. You may see some red flags within that individual, and it's going to teach you how to ask them if they're doing okay. The persuade is huge because of that stigma that I'm talking about. An individual who may be suffering from a mental illness is going to steer away from receiving some type of help. So this is your way of persuading them, letting them know that it is okay to get some treatment, and I will never negatively judge you or label you in any way. And then the refer, which I think is extremely important, because if I am someone who is expressing my suicidal ideation or depression to you, you're going to have a fixer mentality. And so you're going to want to fix me. You're going to want to take all my problems and put them on your shoulder and fix what I'm going through, which is only going to create problems for you. So I think refer is extremely important. But
refer to who?
So
or to what?
Right. So the refer is going to be a mental health professional. And so to be able to do that, you need to be educated on what counseling agencies, what different resources are available to you in your community. So once you're educated on that and you get to the refer part, this is your way. After you've talked with that individual and they feel comfortable with receiving some type of help, you then persuade them to that professional help and let the professional take it from there. And so you're not, bogging yourself down and taking all of their problems and trying to fix it. You're then getting them to someone who is professionally trained to fix that issue.
Is this something that
key there is professionally trained?
Hang on, yeah, but to those individuals, and again, we all have down days, right? Is that something that is typically you need to have either medical insurance cover it? Are there some public programs? I mean, when you refer to people, where to go or what facility or who to talk to, is it something that they're saying, well, I can't afford it?
A lot of times insurance will cover counseling visits. And so they can rely on insurance on some. So there might be some type of, payment within that. But I think once you've passed the persuade, if you were successful in your persuading, I don't think there should be a cost on saving someone's life in my mind. So if you're able to persuade that individual, their insurances would be able to help. And that could be something that you educate yourself on too, because each agency is going to be different. And so if your loved one has some type of insurance, you can then look into that counseling agency and say, hey, I know that you are, financially strained and maybe not be able to pay for something like this. I found this agency that takes your insurance, and that insurance will pay most of it.
I know that a lot of so when you're dealing with substance abuse and things of that nature as an employer, there are organizations in a lot of areas that will absolutely be it's a granted thing, right? So it's something that there are facilities, there are organizations that will provide therapy. I'm drawing a blank of what it is in the area. It's some cares. I forget what it is, because this is a previous career back when I was at the moving company. We would refer to people that that were dealing with issues like this, that there are either substance abuse, whether it be mental health or whatever it might be, that we would be able to give them a phone number to call, and then they would be able to pursue that if they so chose.
Yeah, and that's definitely improving. I think a lot of workplaces are understanding that mental illness is a huge thing. And if, a lot of, I would say owners of businesses or whatever, they want, their focus is on the product and making sure that they're, making money essentially, but having employees who are struggling mentally is going to hinder that. So I think looking at it from their perspective, providing something like that is super beneficial for that individual from an empathetic standpoint, but also from a business standpoint. So I think there is a lot of success that could be had with more and more businesses, more companies, different agencies providing that. So I know for my job, I unfortunately see some things, and that's all everyone who works in the investigative unit and in the morgue department, everybody within the coroner's office, we have that availability. We are able to get counseling services through our agency, so they're ensuring that we are okay as well if that's something that we need. So that is improving. I think it needs to continue to improve. I think more and more people need to jump on board and provide that for their employees, a part of their health insurance. I think
that's real change. I mean, you know, I'm seeing a lot, and just, you know, Kevin had a perspective on the shooting and on guns, and obviously you talked about, you know, that when you were talking about white males being a predominant I guess, demographic of what you're investigating. They have access to those things. He comments about, you know, the political side of it. And I think that's what we're talking about here, is that it's not just about, oh, we need gun control. Oh, we need, you know, mental health things. I'm seeing a lot more companies and even schools that their way of addressing it. And I truly hope it is in best intentions, is the fact that it's like, oh, we're providing more mental health days and all that stuff. And it's, I think that is a good effort. It's a feel good thing. That's not real change. That's not what you're doing.
Right.
Mental health days is like, if you need a mental health day and I'm an employer and I don't know what the laws are, right? This is just us talking here, but it's like, if you need a mental health day, I need you to go to let me refer you to someone. Yeah. So yeah, you get 10 mental health days. These aren't just personal days that you're like, dude, I'm just stressed out. You know, I'm up to here. I just need we've used that term before. I think a lot of people have. I'm taking a mental health day. Yeah. And that's you binging on Netflix. It's you going to a spa. That's you taking a walk outside. That's like very surface level. But if you have someone that really needs a mental health day that would possibly lead up to something like this that you deal with on a day-to-day basis, it's like, that's fine. We provide this. But when you take a mental health day, we need you to call this number. We need you to go to this office. We need you. This is a mental health day. If you want a personal day, you want a day off, you got, you know, you're hungover, whatever it might be, you know, happy hour turned into 2 a.m. That's not a mental health day. Mental health day, if a company's providing that, it's like, all right, this is it. And these, like, I need you to report back to me that you actually did this. Right. Like, that's actually change. That is something that I'm more tired of, like, us as a society just using mental health as yes, it is an issue, but are you going to actually do something about it? You know, same thing like what Kevin's talking about, like the gun control. It's not just these like hot buttons or these topics. It's not like, oh, if we have gun control or if we do this, it's going to take away suicides. It's going to take away shootings. No, mental health. Well, we need to really tackle mental health by doing what? Right. Like, what is like, you're doing it from, again, the postvention side of it. It's like, no, this shit's already happened. I'm not going to say I can prevent this happening again, because it can't. The person took their own life. It's tragic. But how can it help the next person that leads up to this? That, and again, that's why I was asking about the age, the situation, the medical records. I'm curious also, and I wanted to really throw that in there. If you found any of that, is that, you know, with the medical side of it, is it therapy? Is it pills that are being prescribed? I mean, do you see all that will then transcend into trends? But it's actual, the data that the analytics, as Ray said, the data that you're bringing back. And as this goes on, and hopefully there's more of you, in a sense, more people that are doing what you're doing, you take that data that will then go to not only therapists, not only college programs, you know, as far as people studying this, but actual agencies, government, that they're not just throwing this around with shit that they think is doing well, or it's for votes, or whatever the reason is, or it makes people feel better that we're addressing this. It's like, but what is actually needed? Right.
So you're talking about the implementation of the different recommendations. So that is something that I also have a focus on. So all of these things that I'm talking about today, all the things that I talk about in the fatality review, that's all impactful stuff. But there's an extreme importance on the implementation of those recommendations. And so I'm also following up with these agencies and making sure that they implement them as I'm showing them the data. This is what we're seeing. Now, if you implement this change that has come through this fatality review, this will decline. And so you can have these conversations all day, which I agree needs to happen. More people need to have these conversations. At the end of the day, the importance is on that implementation. And so I'm I'm also actively following up with these agencies to ensure that they are doing this. So like for example, when I was talking about the 65 plus community, which is an at-risk population for suicide, we talked about with different agencies that work with the elderly, they didn't even have on their intake forms any questions related to mental health or suicidal ideation. And so that was an implementation that I made that day during the review. They changed their entire screener that day. And so that in itself is an implementation of a recommendation, because now we're going to get that information hopefully early and actually do something about it, get them the proper treatment that they need. So that was just an example of some type of implementation. I have monthly meetings with different universities because I also see an at-risk population within 20 to 24 that senior year to high school, going into college to that early adulthood. That's an at-risk population.
Why is that?
I think it's
in
just,
your opinion?
I think it's a lot of different things, but I think college is hard. I think it's difficult to navigate that part in your life when say you're a senior and now you're thinking about, where am I going to go to college? What am I going to do for a career? What am I going to do for the rest of my life? That's all stuff that could really, give you an anxiety about your life. And so, I think that has a lot to do with it. I think the world we live in now is completely different than what it was in the past. A lot of different things are prevalent for people within that age range that maybe wasn't in the past. So, I speak with different universities and I talk with their student life. I talk with their counseling agencies on campus and how they're approaching their students and what they can do to enhance the prevention side of things. So.
And with that, I think it's there was a thing that I saw, and it was made to be funny, but there's some seriousness to it in the sense that you go from almost instantly, right? There's about a 4-month gap, but you go from raising your hand to go to the restroom to, hey, what do you want to do for the rest of your life? And is there something that you're seeing that leads us to change how we're doing, the whole college aspect as a freshman? Because like me personally, I went into college as an environmental engineer hopeful, and I left with a major in business management and marketing. And so, is there something that we need to do to take that stress off of, okay, now's the time, you got to figure out what you want to do for the rest of your life?
And I think that has to do with a lot of the staff in universities, making sure that they're educated on that, making sure that they let these students know that college is hard and they understand that. And there's places within the campus that you can go to and talk about these things, and they can help you navigate that part of your life. I know personally at my university, we had like staff advisors. And so they are there along your entire college career, and they're there to help navigate that process with you. So if they are also maybe trained in QPR, when they're having those conversations about navigating that next step in your life, if that individual is expressing some type of red flag, that individual is going to be educated in that and is going to be able to help that individual with next steps in life, but also making sure that they're okay now and make sure that they get that help then. So I think just the education as a whole, but also messaging and different training within universities to make sure that they are having those conversations with their students.
We're seeing a transition also with that, is that, you look at the cost of education, higher education, right? So, and then the outcome. I mean, I think that's, I know that, again, being raised in the suburbs and middle-class family, college was the next step. And I went to college from 98 to 2002. And now the colleges are getting a lot of fire right now, that it's become such an enormous business. Mm-hmm. And again, I think it all started with, furthering education. It's a good thing and all that stuff. But the fact is that what does that get you? Mm-hmm. If it's not job training, you get out of there. A lot of people are getting out of there with 6 figures of debt. And then all of a sudden now you're a 22-year-old and you have this debt, and you get that job
and the job,
the car, the apartment,
and a lot of jobs want you to have, oh, by the way, we need you to have 5 years of experience by the time you get out of college. And it's like, you
got to get that experience then,
right?
It is. It's just expectations of that. Mm-hmm. You talk about that age group, and I don't want to say that we're going down the wrong path. I see there is a little bit of a transition the other way right now, is that college is not necessary. It's not necessarily that. It's the people that are, I guess, more. You talked about switching majors, AJ. I mean, I think that's something that you're trying to figure it out. I don't mean if you're hiring someone for your business, right?
Right.
So you have someone like, AJ, you've got this business with Daniel, the Jennings Java, right?
Yeah.
As you guys expand, if you're going to hire a 18, 22-year-old, it's for a entry-level position. It's an internship. It's something like that.
Yeah.
They come in a lot of times thinking that, well, I see these guys, I want to be in that level. It's like, that's not how it works.
Well, and
so is there something there of expectations for people in life that are leading them for undue pressure?
And with that, in Dallas, you cut in as anytime you want. I personally have found, just through talking with other people, my own experiences, listening to podcasts, whatever. And I feel like a lot of that falls back on the business owner themselves. The business owner has to understand, like, okay, this person coming to me has a 4-year marketing degree, entry level, being aware of the aspect that they are probably, 40 to 80 to 120 grand in debt, and understanding, like, hey, I need to treat this person like a person, make sure that they are equipped to do their job, and let them know that there's growth within the company, even if I start them out a little lower salary wise, hey, let's work it up, things like that, and being aware of that aspect.
I can agree with that. I think it's all about, being empathetic in everyone's situation. But I think, as if we're talking about companies and stuff like that, it's definitely needs to be a focus, as it is an issue that our community is seeing at extreme numbers compared to what it was in the past. And so business models probably need to change, and there's different stuff that they can do better with making sure that they're fostering success within their employee with job performance, but also their life and their mental health as well. So I think that's definitely something we could do.
So I want to tie everything in. So there's kind of a sidebar conversation going on in the comments section, which is great, but the gist of it, and going back to the paper that you brought, coming full circle. Okay. This comment reads, people change, society changes, everything changes. The only thing not changing is the system that governs it. So you and what you do, you're providing what you believe needs to change, and what you see, like, hey, if we make these adjustments, things should get better. What are some of the topics and some of the pieces that you brought that you feel need to change moving forward to hopefully prevent more of these issues? Not issues.
Let me branch into that real quick.
Yeah.
What is from what you're dealing with here, from your analytics, from your experience, your studies, what is the leading cause, or what are the top several leading causes? And I'm not talking about what was the action, the tool, like what happened.
I actually had the same question earlier.
Because I think that, again, going from the topic of postvention to prevention, it has to be what you're doing. I absolutely adore what you're doing, in the sense that you are looking at what has gotten to this point, as opposed to just saying we need to change this, It's like, what is the not just the leading, and maybe it's not that simple, but it's like, what is actually bringing people to your case file?
So, if you are going to say like an ultimate cause, I think the obvious one is going to be mental health. That is an issue that is probably the leading cause of that, but it's not
down further.
So I
mental health. I'm not trying. You're the expert on this. I'm not trying to disagree or cause any problems here, but mental health, I'm already tired of it being a hot topic. I'm not saying you're using it as that,
right?
But mental health is very wide. It's very broad. So it is. Is it the childhood trauma? Is it something that? Is it what you? People say it's changed. People have been committing suicide for centuries,
right?
This has been happening.
Divorce, job loss.
Yeah. Is it a traumatic experience currently? Is it something
recovery from an accident?
Is it a chemical imbalance? Are we finding that it's increasing because of our what we put into our bodies? Is it through is it social media? Is it the input into us, whether it be physically or mentally? When you talk about mental health, is it's not just, oh, they're dying from mental health or they're killing themselves because of mental health. It's because of, this is what I'm seeing the most of as you go through your cases.
So unfortunately, there is not a way for me to pinpoint that, because suicide is so complex. There is, every single issue that you just mentioned is a cause, and it is a high risk one, all of those. And so it's the way that I talk about it, and I have it written here, is that suicide is not cookie cutter. That's the way I put it. And so depression, mental illness, suicidal ideation, all of that is going to present differently in different people. And so it's really, really hard to pinpoint an exact cause, because everyone who dies by suicide had their cause. They had, and it's different than everyone else. And so, I think of individuals that I've worked with. I've had very high succeeding individuals who were, graduating at the top of their class in high school, going to graduate and be engineers in college. Like, they had a lot going for them, right? We have a common misconception as a society that if someone is that successful in life, they can't die by suicide, right? They can't have those thoughts, because they think someone who dies by suicide had to live a very depressed or, unfortunate life, which those happen. But there is people who die by suicide that don't have any of that. And so it's really hard to pinpoint that. And so you have to really look at these populations as a whole and try to implement things that is going to change that. So for what I'm thinking of, those engineer college students, right? An issue that I talk readily about is imposter syndrome. So this is an idea that no matter the success that you're experiencing, imposter syndrome is the idea that you have a cognitive distortion, that you think your life is going to come crashing down at any given moment. The success that you're experiencing is a fluke, right? You're having this mindset. And so to someone on the outside, they think that person's going to be some high-class engineer. That person's going to be very successful. There's no way that they're struggling mentally. And so it's a lot of the education on the fact that it is not cookie cutter, and we need to be open to looking at every single individual differently, as their experience is unique to everyone else.
How does that turn into prevention then?
So for that particular, my prevention on cases that fall into that is making sure that I'm implementing things into universities, as that's something that probably abundance of college students feel, right? Not that just that individual who died by suicide that day, who had imposter syndrome, who was suffering from these cognitive distortions. There's probably an abundance of college students that feel that way, who experience that same thing. So the implementation is actually diving into that university and how they are navigating individuals who may be feeling that way. And so we need to make sure that we're improving our counseling within universities, make sure we have messaging available on universities so that they know it's available to them. When I was in university, I didn't know where my counseling agency was.
Correct.
On the campus. I didn't know where to go.
Guidance counselor, high school, college, same thing.
Didn't know where it was.
No.
And so if we can make sure that all students know where that is, know that there's, places that they can talk about these feelings, and know that it is okay to exist in that world, I feel like it's going to make an impact on that population as a whole. So it's not really possible at this point to drop it down to that individual person, as each individual person who suffers from mental illness or has suicidal ideation, their reasons are completely different.
Understood.
So that's why I try to look at it as more of a population thing. And so we're trying to meet it as a whole. And so we can possibly touch a lot of lives and possibly prevent a lot more deaths that way.
So so in that, I'm listening on this, and I understand that. And when I say like what's the leading cause, I mean, that's obviously when you're looking at demographics, you're looking at population, studies and statistics. I mean, I was a sociology major. I did take some population courses. There are trends, right? I'm not necessarily saying that there's a one size fits all type of a thing. What I'm asking is let's dial into the imposter syndrome. Right. So take away all that traumatic things like the divorce and all that stuff. You have someone that's succeeding financially. They're not up to their eyeballs in debt. That's the stereotype. You're right. You have someone that starts their own practice, their own business. And, on paper, everyone looks at you as like, oh, you're a business owner. Oh, you're a lawyer. Oh, you're a dentist. Oh, you're like this. Like, you're killing it right now. Look at that car you're driving, doing all that stuff. That's like imposter syndrome in a sense. And again, what I'm thinking of it when you explain that. But behind the scenes, they're six figures in debt. They don't know how to get out of it. They're basically that poor person that got a credit card, more or less, right? But on the outside, they're this image.
Mhm.
But even the people that you said something where it's like they are afraid that it could come crashing down.
Mhm.
So even someone that has none of that, and they have just been striving to be successful, they were either raised that way or something lit a fire, and they are doing that. And it almost like when it gets to your desk, it doesn't even make sense. So like they didn't have a traumatic
Mhm.
childhood. They didn't have like finances that were struggling. They didn't have any, like, they didn't owe anyone. They didn't have, everything was looking good.
Mhm.
But there's something that caused them to be like, what I took from what you said, the true, where no one really probably looks at that,
Mhm.
is they like, it doesn't make any sense.
Right.
But you say it's like, they're afraid that they will fail,
Yes.
or they will get fired, or they
Mhm.
will suffer a malpractice, or
Yep.
their significant other will leave them. And it's like, it's all, in a sense, it's all made up in their head.
Right. And so
It's-
that would
it's
come
this
down to that
fear.
that chemical imbalance and those cognitive distortions that you were talking about earlier.
Or is it the pressure from their upbringing, and not just their family, but from society? Is that, yeah, you're doing well now, but it could go bad, and then what do I do?
I
So do
agree.
I go out on top
Right. Yeah. No.
before something goes bad?
And that's all. And that's what I was talking about. It's hard to like pinpoint one cause just because there is so many things that go in to that person with their, so say we're talking about the imposter syndrome. So they already have that chemical imbalance and the cognitive distortion. Then you put that onto, now I'm graduating college, which means did I even know anything that I just studied, even though that I'm graduating with honors, but the next step is that I actually got to go be an engineer now. Right.
Yeah.
So now if I go to be an engineer, now they're going to find out that I'm not good at this, that I didn't
I've
know
known
any of
some
this.
of those people that are like, we like, especially when I was in my 20s, right? I knew those that were professional students.
Yeah.
I graduated, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, yeah, they now they're getting the master's, now they're getting a doctorate,
Mhm.
and then they get their second doctorate.
Right.
And it's like,
Now what?
are you afraid to work?
Mhm.
Because their identity is they
Being
are
a
the
good
best at
student.
what they do.
Right. And I think that's why we see a lot of high succeeding athletes dying by suicide, that those pressures of being that high class of an athlete, or that high class in whatever you're doing, doctor, lawyer, engineer, sports, whatever that is, there's pressures that come with that. And so we need to be more educated on that as a society so we can understand that is a possibility. And so we need to open our eyes. Don't have tunnel vision. Don't just look at individuals who are, obviously depressed or have experienced trauma after trauma after trauma after trauma. Those people, it's easy to identify that they are, suffering and may have suicidal ideation. The hard part is really digging deeper into those stressors that don't blatantly say, hey, that may make someone suicidal, right? There's not a lot of people who know about imposter syndrome. There's not a lot of people who would look at someone who's that high succeeding and say that, like, oh, they might be struggling a little bit. Let me check in with them, right?
So what is your message? Or what is the hope? This is an ongoing thing, right?
Mhm.
I mean,
Right.
This is something that is a science, and data is constantly feeding in and constantly changing.
Mhm.
But I mean, what is that message? You said you want to talk to universities, you want to talk to society as a whole.
Mhm.
I think that the messages right now are very, it's from the source. So it's either from media, it's from social media, it's the people like, right now, what really annoys me. I appreciate I appreciate people in my life that I follow, and in general, that whatever the cause is, whatever's happening, that they try to make, from their phone or whatever,
Mhm.
from their house or their apartment or whatever, like they're not dealing with it, but it's like, this is the next social cause. And that's, I already know people in my life that I do care about,
Mhm.
that I know that when the shooting happened, when the whole Russia-Ukraine thing, when, like these causes, like that's what's going to show up on their Instagram stories. That's what's going to
Mhm.
that's I can appreciate that, but it's not necessarily you have to just dive into one cause and
Right.
do all this, like what you're doing. I appreciate that. And I think that that's the difference.
Yeah.
It's not just that like someone close to you took their own life, or someone you talked about celebrities. If a celebrity takes their own life, like I was surprised that, I mean, I know it's an age difference, but when Naomi Judd took her own life,
Mhm.
my social media, at least, and the media in general, didn't talk shit about it. Like
Mhm.
they were just like, oh yeah, you took her own life and all that stuff, and then it was like, and the next news story,
On to the next thing.
it was
yeah.
like, well, Ukraine, and it's like wait, but now that there's gun violence, which that's what a lot of this feed's blowing up, which is not what we're really necessarily talking about, but it's about the fact that you're diving into something that it's like that is a cause of a lot of other problems.
Mhm.
And when it gets to what you're dealing with suicide, is it shouldn't just be the thing that I expect to see on your Instagram story
Right.
for 3 days, and then it's like, oh,
On to the
now
next
something-
thing.
It's like,
Right.
There's a lot of things that could be possibly prevented
Mhm.
if there's a better understanding about all this stuff.
Right. And I think that's I've said the word multiple times, but I think it's huge. It's just the lack of education that society has about. They think, okay, by posting out about suicide awareness, like, and then that's my part, right?
Which I think
part.
is important. I think
I agree.
think it is a factor.
I agree.
I think that the posting on social media is kind of like what Steve talked about earlier when he mentioned when employers like, oh, you have this many mental health days.
Yeah.
Like that's the very bare
Right.
minimum they can do
It's an effort
just
that I
to cover
appreciate.
their ass.
Right.
Well,
and
we
that-
have national, the Suicide Prevention Month and
Yeah.
all that stuff.
which is super important.
yes.
And I think we need to continue to have those conversations. We need to continue to post it. And I see it a lot more now, like, different TV stations, making sure that they have commercials related to mental health and stuff. So as we continue to have those conversations, the people who are suffering in silence will feel more comfortable to come out because they now know that everyone in society knows that this is an issue. And then if, say LeBron James is talking about mental health and I'm struggling for mental health, I can speak about it because I look up to him and he's able
You're
to do it. I'm able to
empowered.
do it.
Yeah, you're
Right. So
empowered
we need
do
to
that.
have those, but it's important that we get the implementation, which is what I'm really trying to put into play. Because like I said before, you can talk about it all day and that's impactful and it's going to help people because they're going to feel comfortable. But until we actually do something about it, it's just going to be just that.
The
It's just going to be a
prevention side of
post.
it.
So we have to implement things, change the way agencies are treating mental health and change those ways that we are approaching individuals with mental illness. That's when we're going to see that ultimate impact. So it's the stuff that goes behind the scenes, the way that they're assessing their clients or the way, for hospitals, I think we're screening rather appropriately. If you go to the doctor, they may give you a depression screen. I think we're doing the screening appropriately, but the fail in it, in my opinion, is the lack of follow-up.
Mhm.
They talk about it and then that patient goes home and that's it. Right.
Or they get a prescription.
Right. And I think that and medication helps a lot. But another note that I have here is that a commonality that I've seen between families is that they come up to me, they're like, he was taking antidepressants.
That
Well,
They
how
should
many
have
times
changed-
do we see a
That's-
commercial
I had a
for an
earlier
antidepressant?
point.
Yeah.
I had an
so-
earlier question about
Yeah.
that with the
So-
the intake.
So they say they were taking anti-medication that should have changed the way that they were thinking. Right. Well, in my opinion, and I think an opinion of a lot of suicide prevention specialists, the important way to do that is you need to pair that medication with therapy. That therapy is going to teach you the coping strategies and how to deal with those cognitive distortions so that the medication is going to level you out to a place where you can then be okay to learn those coping strategies. But doing one and not the other, if you are suffering that way, is a less rate of success. But if I get medication and counseling going at the same time, your success rate to get better mentally
So support.
is higher.
So support.
So,
I-
so
I had a question real quick. I'm
go
sorry.
ahead. No, you're fine.
Like, I don't know if this is something that you deal with, on your side of it is, conditions, actual diagnosed mental health, not just the treetop thing, the feel good, hot topic, because I am starting to get more and more bitter to that. I'm trying not to personally, not that it really matters, but, things like bipolar.
Mhm.
I know that, people that are bipolar are sometimes at risk for suicide.
Yeah.
I mean, that's part of it, right?
Mhm.
There's something though that you talk about these medications and then you talk to the family. Do you ever find it, or do you assume sometimes that yes, they were prescribed it, but I know that a lot of things like for like bipolar disorder, lithium and then other drugs beyond that will then cause weight gain. And then all of a sudden people will stop taking it because now they're unhappy with themselves because it's out of their control. Is that this drug that they're being given mentally, it's supposed to they are more steady. They are not that extremes. And bipolar disorder is obviously a very varying type of a diagnosis as well. But I know that as a specific that people will then stop taking the medication or will dose themselves down because they don't want to have weight gain. They don't want to have these adverse side effects. That the important reason that they're taking this is that, yes, you can eat healthy, you can do all this stuff, you can exercise and all this stuff, and you're still gaining weight. Now all of a sudden you have another mental issue going on here. Is that so if I know this is why I'm gaining weight, so I'm going to cut back on that. All of a sudden you're back into what got you there. Yeah. So again, there's some dangers there, I think, of that. So yeah, they were taking this. Were they though? Right. It's like, did anyone actually look, is there a medicine cabinet full of this pill that they were supposed to be taking? Did they go to the sense that they were worried about it, that they were actually just throwing away the daily doses, but they weren't taking it? I mean, I think there's a lot of variables there that it's not as cut and dry.
And that's why I think it's important to have that support with when taking that medication. They're going to be able to educate you on those side effects. They can let you know that this is not something that you're necessarily going to have to take for the rest of your life. It's just going to put you in a spot right now so we can get you the help that you need. And so it's going to kind of level you out a little bit so you can then talk with your counselor, go to therapy. But I see that a lot, is that they come up to me really frantic, like they were prescribed, some type of antidepressant medication. And I have to educate them on, like, yes, that's great. But I think the better success rate is if they had that support going along with the medication. And so just treatment itself needs to be normalized. And I've talked about that before. And we were having conversations a little bit off air, a little bit about treatment itself. And once we normalize treatment, more people will be okay in getting it. And then if you pair that with the medication, get them in a level state, then we're able to make that actual impact on their mental health that I don't think one or the other. So even just going to therapy, sometimes you do need medication, and vice versa. If you're taking medication, you're going to need that therapy as well to get those coping strategies, which is going to help you in the long run. That's something that you can maybe later on get off the antidepressant medication because you have the proper coping strategies. And so when your mental health starts to decline, you know what to do to improve it.
And with this, it's cool for me to see, like, you two go at it. I get to be the fly on the wall aspect. What I'm taking from your guys' conversation is essentially that we as a society, and correct me if I'm wrong in any aspect, but we as a society need to stop looking at, okay, here are the pills, you're fixed. A lot of times it's almost like the pills themselves are just blankets to cover the actual issue. To bring everything full circle, what we need to start seeing is these pills aren't a blanket, aren't a fix-all, aren't a cure-all, but these pills are just to get you back to a level, understanding playing field. Exactly. And now you need to take that extra step and you need to go talk to somebody. Because let's play dumb for a second. And okay, here's Steve, here's pills. Take me
into it when you said let's play dumb.
Well, thanks for keeping it lighthearted. Appreciate you. Here's these pills. Take these once a week. So now everyone around you, if you let him into it, now everyone around you is like, oh, okay, Steve's taking these pills. He's good. We don't have to worry about him.
Better. All that stuff.
But in reality, here's these pills. They're going to bring you to a level talking point. And now enters Dallas, who has talked to psychiatrists, psychologists, what have you. And, oh, by the way, Steve, you should definitely still go talk to somebody now that you're on this level playing field. It's not fixed.
I mean, that's essentially the medication is going to make you feel better, but it's not going to change what's going on in your mind. It's not going to, change those cognitive distortions that are going on at the moment.
Take away any of the stress or any of the triggers that were there before.
Right. So it's
just there to help, your internal situation, but it doesn't necessarily take care of the outward issues.
Right. I agree. We definitely need both.
Sean.
So we got another
Sean Wilkinson. Yeah. What's that?
My bad. I'm not the host.
You're fine. Go ahead.
We got another add in.
All right. Well, just what you guys are talking about, I can attest to. I'm on two different kinds of antidepressants and have been on them for years. A lot of it had to do with the brain tumor I had, but also that didn't fix everything. And I talked to you in between the break where a few months ago I was fighting depression and suicidal and was almost going to go that way. But knowing that over the years of dealing with this, talking to a counselor and him giving me steps and procedures as to how to get me out of that hole was saved my life. I would like to say, and my wife being a counselor kind of helped me put me in the right steps. But that is such a vital thing to have, because like you said, AJ, pills aren't going to fix it. It can help a little bit, but if you're getting down the rabbit hole too deep, nothing's going to help unless you talk about it.
Yep.
So that's all I got to say.
I just want to say thank you for saying that. It's extremely important that you were open and saying stuff like that, and we need more of that. So thank you for doing that.
I will say also that Sean, a good friend of mine, that is one of those. What I like about Sean, there's two sides of that comment, just from I don't want to say an outsider, because again, I feel close friends. He's that type of person that he'll tell me, like, if I text him, hey, you want to go? Hey, I haven't been doing well this week, but I'm addressing it. It's something that I've gotten those texts from him before.
Mm-hmm.
And if someone like Sean, and for what it's worth, Sean, that support side of it is that if I woke up to a text or whatever from, like, if I reach out to, like, Sean's not texting me back, hey, I messaged his wife, Teresa, and you hear the news and you're like, Sean, like, really? Like, he's always engaged with everyone. He's always super friendly. He's always seems to be this constructive person where it's like, he's not always happy, you know what I mean? Like, everyone goes through ups and downs, but like, not Sean, and I think that's
doing well for himself.
Well, I just feel like that's something like, if when you lost your job and you're working for Amazon and you were just like on the outside, be like, yeah, no, this is fucking great. I'm working, I'm getting all these steps in and all that stuff. And it's like, it had to be beating you up, it was a nice reprieve. Now that you're back in the occupation that you were doing, again, from the outside, it looks like, okay, Sean's doing well. Like, he's got his career back. He's got, paying the bills. He's got, they're talking about all these vacations. They're doing all this stuff. And it's like, that, again, maybe a little bit of that imposter side, or from the outside, maybe that's not the right term, but it's that kind of like everything seems smooth. But again, I think that we all deal with those bad mornings.
Yes. And I think that
those bad days, those bad thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
Those times where, and Dallas, I don't know if you've ever seen this in some of your studies, is that, yeah, they're always the life of the party. They're always, because I've known those people, and I've known a couple of people that have taken their own lives, unfortunately. And it's one of those things. It's like, yeah, they're always like that. But when they're by themselves, it's like, oh yeah, I'm so happy. Like, let's go do this. Let's go do that. And it's like, when everyone's busy and it's kind of like they're just sitting there. It's like, now I'm
right
with my thoughts. Now I don't have that. Why don't people want to hang out with me? Why, what am I doing? Like, I feel like that is a common thing that everyone deals with.
Yeah.
My doctor was like, hey, do you have your up days and down days? And I'm like, yeah, I feel like everyone does. It's like, yes, they do. It's how you handle it. You know what I mean? And I think that not everyone is necessarily, whether you're taking like antidepressants and stuff like that, sometimes it's like, well, and you go back to there's so many factors, right? Well, I feel better on this dose, so I'm just going to up it myself. I'm going to self-dose myself.
Self-medicate, yeah.
Self-medicate in a sense. Or I'm going to do this, and it's like, well, I feel good when I'm drinking, and I also feel good when I'm taking these pills, so I'll just do a little bit of both.
Right.
And you know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to go crazy with it. But again, you have that. There's so many different aspects of it. And I love this conversation, because when I ask a question like, what's the leading cause? I love the way that you feel to that question, that it's like, yes, you do see trends. I'm sure. I mean, that's anything when you're doing, again, a population, as you called it, like when you're doing all this stuff, the data is streaming in, you can rate things and all that stuff, but it doesn't mean that just because this is the leading cause of suicide, that the 10th cause of suicide
isn't important.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think
valid. Like, I can't get this 10th type of person up to the leading cause, because those two are completely different.
Yes. Yeah. And that's thing, it comes back to just that tunnel vision thing. And it's exactly like you shared there, that sometimes you're looking at Sean, you're like, no way, it's Sean, right?
Yeah.
Well, that is a little bit of tunnel vision creeping in, because you think, well, everything's going well for Sean, there's no way he can do that. But we need to open our eyes, make sure we're checking in with our people, the support system at home, friend groups, coworkers, all of that is extremely important. And ultimately, I think just having that conversation with someone could save that person's life. I think conversations that you had with your wife ultimately could have saved your life. You know what I mean? So that is something that we need to be comfortable with doing. Don't clam up when someone comes to you and says, hey, I'm not feeling great. Do something about it. Be there for that person.
You want to get together. You want to talk. Like, I feel like there is something there that whether it be family members, friends, or whatever. I'm not saying that it's always your responsibility and you have to take blame for that. Again, if someone, has something happen to them, I think it's a two-sided thing. I think that, if you are that person that, hopefully you don't want them to end up on Dallas's desk, right? If you are having those thoughts, if you are having that, maybe you don't reach out to a doctor, maybe you don't call that hotline, but you reach out to someone and you reach out to your circle of people that are important to you. And if that person doesn't reach out, they're busy, whatever. Go down the line, give yourself that effort. And I will also say this, I kick myself a lot of times when I'm thinking of someone. And it doesn't even have to be serious. AJ, for example, he comes on the podcast when I see him in the shop, when something social media, we'll comment back and forth. There are times like I'll see a social media post. I will think of something like you're big into bow hunting. I'll see something. It is a lot of effort and work when you're not the person that might end up on Dallas's desk.
Right.
But when you have people in your life, this is a responsibility I think that we all share.
Yes.
You're thinking about them. It is easier now more than ever.
Text them.
Send a text.
Hey, man, saw this come across, reminded me of bow hunting, thought of you, hope you're doing okay.
Yeah. I mean,
that takes
something
15
simple. We
seconds.
have the means. It goes a long way.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times it's not just like, oh man, I'm glad you texted me. I'm in a dark place. No, it's that constant effort all around you, and surround yourself with people that do that. Is that it's not always you got to go grab a beer. It's not always you have to like hang out. It's not always let's go do dinner. Let's go get drinks. Let's do this. It's not always like, hey, I thought of you because I saw this ad or I saw this thing on TV. It's literally, I know for certain that we all get to that point that randomly in your day, you're literally like, you think of something that happened in the past. And you're like, oh, AJ or Sean or whoever it is, mom, it's whatever. I'm thinking about it. And you're just like, oh, yeah, no, I should text them. I should call them. I should do this. That constant social construct around your life will not only possibly build up people around you, but that's also if you, that'll actually build you up. I feel like, because it keeps the conversation going.
And a prime example of that, it could be something so simple like what I did with you when I rolled in today. Okay, I'm at my house before the show, and I'm cooking up 3 pounds of ground venison. And I'm like, you know what?
Like Steve's gaining weight. I mean, he probably should eat a little healthier.
No,
nice thing.
No, honestly,
a little puffy in the face.
Verbatim, word for word. I know for a fact that
that's what I heard.
Sorry. Thank you for always keeping it light. Like I said,
gotta throw it in a little bit.
Anyways, the step by step of what went through my mind was, I know Steve doesn't hunt, but I know Steve is into fitness. And I know that venison is some of the most lean, best meat you could ever eat. I could have easily just been like, man, I can't wait to tell him that I cooked up venison. But I took that 15 seconds that it took me to find a Tupperware container. And it's
15 minutes. I'll talk to Ellie.
15 seconds.
Oh,
and I do all the organization of the Tupperware. And I was like, you know what? I'll bring him a little bit of this. And it was a simple, nothing other than that gesture of, I'll bring you 4 ounces. Here's 4 ounces of ground venison. But that's what you're talking about. That's that check in on those people that you care about kind of thing, And if it ends at, hey man, I brought you some ground venison. I hope you enjoy it.
You're not
great.
That Tupperware back.
No, that's why I gave you one of the worst ones. That was one of those.
You got to know your people.
That was one of those old Chinese food containers.
Yeah,
Everybody's got them.
Takeout from PF Chang's.
Yeah, for sure. But you see, we're all diving into the same aspect of like, check in on them. It could be something as not meaningless, but as small as a 10. Yeah, as small as a 10-second. Yo, Dal, hope you're doing well, man. I know you've got all this stuff going for you. I hope you're still doing okay, and I hope you're handling it well. It could be something that you take 30 seconds and you're like, let me portion out Steve a little bit of a little bit of ground venison just
Yeah.
to make sure he's doing okay. You know, just do something.
And if I can, this is like to put it in perspective a little bit. Say I am in a dark time, right? I'm sitting at home. I feel pretty depressed. Kaz texts me with a joke of some sort, or just says, hey, when we hanging out, when we doing this, right? Him, in my mind, that simple text goes, man, that guy's thinking about me. And if I did go through with something that I'm thinking today, he'd probably miss me, right? That could be a big issue for him, right? So then I'm thinking of him. I'm now being empathetic within my body, like, now I can really hurt Cass, you know, because he thought about me on this random Tuesday, and I'm in a dark time, right? That gets me through that day. Now it's Wednesday. I'm having a whole better day, right? That one day, because you can be suicidal in 5 minutes. It doesn't take it doesn't take your whole life to be suicidal. So if I'm, you know, sitting there and I'm in a dark depression, and Kaz hits me with some, you know, awful dad joke out of nowhere, but it makes me chuckle, and then it makes me think about him. He cares about me.
Yeah,
that gets me through that day. Tomorrow can be a whole brighter day for me, right? And then that's just gonna be something that continue to put me on a path of success.
You may not see it. I've got a friend of mine. Sorry, I got a friend
you're
of
fine.
mine, that I went to college with, right? And he's gone through a very rough couple years.
Mm-hmm.
We reconnected a little bit. He lives here in town, and he came out one Sunday, and it was great to see him. He had gone through a divorce, and he came over to the house, and he just laid it all out.
Mm-hmm.
And it was what I thought was hopefully going to be a beginning of maybe not all the time, but, you know, like, you know, if I have something going on, or, you know, hey, you want to come out Sunday fun day, watch some NFL, whatever, you know,
right.
Or, hey, I'm having a cookout or whatever. I've sent some unanswered texts to, hey, when do you want to hang out again?
Yeah.
There's no right way to do it. You know what I mean? Like sending something funny, or sending something that's like a memorable thing. Like, hey, we used to like talk movie quotes or whatever it might be. There's only so much you can do on the other side. But I mean, I'm not saying that I could do more. I definitely could. But I also realize that you can only do so much on the outside to pull them out of that. It's not your responsibility.
Right. And the thing is, I mean,
a little effort.
Right.
It's more than not.
Yeah. And he may not have responded, but he read it.
He did.
He read it. And so he knows that if he's ready to talk to someone, he knows that you could be that person.
Correct.
And so that in itself is extremely important. And another thing that I always say is that you don't have to say the right thing. You just have to say something.
I like that.
It's
you open the line
just something.
Communication.
Right.
Yeah.
Just let that person know that you can be someone that they come to. They may never come to you, but you're there. They know you're there. And if they choose to do so, you are the person that they go to. I also like to say it to people who may be someone who is suffering with depression. Get those supports. Get, you know, in your mind, write it down, have it in a notebook, have those people that, you know, if you're having a bad day, you can shoot them a text, you can call them, and they're going to make you happy for whatever that time is that you're talking with them. Have those people to reach out to.
The burden, though, sometimes I feel like people feel. I wouldn't say I've ever been completely suicidal. I have been very low. Yeah. I don't have the guts. I'll put it that way. I'll just be miserable. I don't think I have the guts to do that. But when I'm low and someone reaches out to me, I don't answer my phone.
Yeah.
So that's where I reflect the other way. When I reach out to that individual, he doesn't respond. I don't blow up his phone. Just boom.
Right.
Hey, dude, call me. Because I know that if I'm having a day where I don't want to talk to anyone, you can send me all the texts. You can blow up my phone. You can even knock on my door. I'm not answering it.
Right.
I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
And the more you do it, makes me feel more guilty.
Right.
So it's like you have to have this kind of tact, balance. You have to understand if someone's showing that and they reach out, which I've had that happen as well with a friend, where the text, they reached out to me because they had that. They knew.
Yeah.
Text started in the evening. And I got 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. Text started not making sense. And then the text that followed was, I took too many pills. And that person, luckily, reached out, and through a little team of support people that then I reached out to, they followed up with going into a facility, and
that's exactly,
they're doing better now.
They're
not done.
Right.
They're not out of it.
No.
Tim Dodge, talked about someone in his family earlier on where, at 12 years old, I think it was a niece or something that attempted, continued on for another 15 years or whatever, and had a family going, and then in their 20s, like, it's not done.
No,
that's the whole thing with the pills, like, like the medicine. It's not over. It
helps
constant.
It helps, but it's not a cure all.
Right.
Yeah.
When that needs for someone who is reaching out to those individuals, you need to, don't go in there with the fixer mentality. Just be there for that person when they're ready.
Yeah.
Know resources that it's available, that kind of stuff. So you can be there at their disposal when they may need some help. But you're right. They might be someone who doesn't like to talk in those situations. And if it's a close, like say it's a family member, just communicate that.
Yeah.
You'd be like, hey, when you're in a good state, you can communicate with that support person. Like, hey, there is certain times that I just don't like to talk.
Yeah.
And then you could say, that's fine. If that's what you need to do, that's fine. Just know I'm here when you need me. And so that's that simple, having that out on a platter for them so they know that they have somewhere to go. And that comes down to just being comfortable with having those conversations. And not everyone is like that. And so just make sure, if you are someone who can fall into those dark times and those depressions, that you have people that are comfortable with having those conversations in incidences like that you can reach out and they will, do something to help you.
We had a comment, the biggest problem is at 3 a.m. or so, there's no one there.
Right.
Just the quiet darkness that engulfs me. If that happens and you make it through to the next morning, that's, I think, the moment that maybe you feel like it's past. Hopefully that's a sign that to you that you can. Yeah, I could text. No one's going to answer right now.
Right.
You're probably right. That's unfortunate, and it's sad. But if you make it through, that's hopefully a time that you can reach out just to a friend, to someone in your life.
Yeah.
And at the very least, if you don't want to be a burden, which is another comment that's coming through, is that I don't want to be a burden on anyone. You're not a burden on someone that does this for a living. That's what you were talking about as far as reaching out to some Google.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Google. You think you have a substance abuse problem. You think you have these thoughts of suicide. You don't, whether it be ego, whether it be embarrassment, whether it be you don't want to be a burden on the people that are close to you. Be a burden on a stranger, because you're not.
Right.
Reach out, start there, keep it quiet, keep it to yourself if that's comfortable, but do something about it. Because yes, maybe at 3 a.m. no one's there. The suicide prevention hotline is.
I was just about to say, you just go up the ladder a little bit. That's why safety plans are extremely important, and you can just start climbing them. You start with your support people at home. If it is 3 a.m. and you don't, they're probably sleeping at that time, you then go up a rung on the ladder. You go to the next one, which is, the suicide prevention hotline, which is actually going to a simpler number here soon. So it's actually, if you're in a time of crisis, it's going to be a lot easier to dial that number. It's just going to be 3 digits instead of the whole 1-800 number. So that's something that will be hitting, coming live soon. So at that 3 a.m. time, you just go up to the next level. Okay, my friends aren't going to be really available right now. Let me call the prevention hotline. Let me call these 24-hour counseling agencies and just talk through that moment, that one given moment. And then you get through that day, you then can go, down and talk to a friend or whatever. But I also think it's important to make sure that your friends know that you don't feel that they will be a burden. Kaz and I, we have a group message with a lot of our friends from college. It can get very jokey. It can be very macho. It can be very, laughing everything off, right?
We're former college baseball players.
Right.
So you imagine how a lot of the conversation goes.
So, we can just be laughing everything off. But I think Kaz can attest to this, that I message in there all the time, that they can reach out to me at any given moment. And if I will do my best and help them, and they will never be a burden on me if they are feeling some type of way ever. And so that's me letting my friends know, if you feel like you're being a burden, you're not being a burden to me. And I'm telling you that right now. So it's a two-sided thing. But make sure, if you are going to be a support person for someone, make sure that they know that their problems are not a burden on you, and you're gonna be there for them. And it doesn't always have to be something extravagant. Just be there to talk to them and get them through that moment. And like I said, tomorrow might be better.
It'd almost be a bigger burden to be without them.
Right. Exactly. So I like I said, I say in that group message all the time, as much as we can just be laughing everything off, I make sure that they know that by reaching out to me, you would never, ever be a burden on me. And I will try my best to get you through any situation that you may be going through, despite, us maybe some comedic relief. When I say something like that, we throw a joke in next or whatever.
Yeah.
But that message is out there and they know that. And so they will reach out to me in those moments. And I've had friends reach out to me in those moments. And I continue to let them know, like, you are not a burden, because that is something that people who are depressed, it's a burden on them currently. So they feel like if they're passing it on to you, it's now a burden that they're passing to you. But that's why it's important to have that refer option in the QPR, because although you're there, you're not going to be the fix all. There's other things that we could talk about that maybe is going to actually change in the long run. Yeah. Don't even say anything.
Sometimes talking for a little bit, letting them talk for a little bit goes a long way.
You don't even have to reply. Just be there. Let them hear you breathing on the other side of the phone. You don't ever have to even say anything. Just listen.
I want to say this in Dallas. I want to hear what you have to say about it. But like everyone out there, if you have an emergency, if something is about to happen, if something did happen, you talked about 3 digits on a phone. What is the 3 digits that everyone knows?
Actually, 911. I thought you were talking about that one. Yeah, 911.
I mean, I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but if you are at that point, whether it be 3 a.m., 2 p.m., whatever it is, you don't want to be a burden on someone. And you don't know the suicide prevention line. You don't know, you don't feel like going on Google and saying, I'm having suicidal thoughts. Who do I call? Right. 911. Will address you.
And sometimes in those moments, it's hard to think.
I know everyone's got these preconceived notions about how 911 police coming out and all that stuff. But at the very least, they'll answer. And they will either direct you to someone that they can, like, they will direct your call to elsewhere. Or if you're at that moment, hopefully they will actually get someone out to your house or to your wherever you are.
And now they have I know like CPD, Franklin County Sheriff's, they have social workers on staff. I have seen the crisis mobile unit on my scenes multiple times. So if you do, because sometimes when you're in a moment like that, it's hard to think. There's a lot going on. It's hard to think through things. It's hard to think of, I need to call the suicide hotline or I need to call my counselor. It's hard to think of that sometimes. But if you do call 911 and it comes to that, and in your safety plan, that could be like last case scenario. You have a lot of things that you can go through prior to that. But when you call 911, they are trying to get these social workers on staff and get these crisis intervention people who are coming there in an empathetic way, because unfortunately there are people that maybe are off put by officers or have had some type of experience with a police officer, and it's hard to call that. But if you know that they're going to bring someone who is going to show in their mind, they may be thinking a social worker is going to be a little bit more empathetic. They have them on staff now. And so if you do call 911 and you're in a crisis moment, they're going to send someone out for you. And so that's just something that can be on the top of your safety list. And, hopefully you don't have to get to that point, but there might be a time that it comes to that, but at least you know that they have that as well. So there's resources everywhere. I think Franklin County is, because it's the jurisdiction I work. So I say Franklin County, it's resource rich. There is so many resources for people who are suffering for any reason, but mental health, that's because what we're talking about today. But there's so many resources, but the issue right now is in the lack of connection. And so different agencies need to improve the way that they're educating people and improve connections into the community, making sure that everyone knows what's available. Messaging, all this stuff is super important. But if you don't think that there's something out there for you, I promise there is, because there's so many resources now related for mental health and suicidal ideation. So I just say, please reach out and just really have a safety list in place and start at close to home. And then you start moving up as those issues arise. So
let me ask you this, and then we'll go into closing remarks. Sorry to put you on the spot, Dallas. Do you think that all suicides are preventable, or do you think there will be a day where they will be? No right answer.
If I'm going personal, I'm
Yes.
not talking professional. The answers, they're all preventable.
Okay.
But if I'm going personal, I believe the same. And that's
Okay.
why I do what I do. I believe all suicides are preventable. I think that's not going to be everyone's opinion, and that's okay. But my opinion is that they are preventable because there is so much that can be done. There's so many ways to intervene, so much intervention points, so much information that isn't even, tapped yet that I think is going to come out. It's going to educate more people. More people are becoming comfortable with the conversation. We're going to let people know that it's okay to talk about it. It's okay to not be okay. It's okay to need therapy.
Yeah,
it's
we had
okay
a
to need
comment on there
medication.
from Ryan Jones. It's okay to not be okay.
Yeah. So I think once that becomes an issue that society is okay with approaching, I think we can prevent suicide no matter what you've been through.
And for those that can't read it on the video feed, luckily we had some good quality video on the second part, so I'm glad that worked out. But for the audio listeners, talk to me about your hat. You had that on, I think, the last time you were in the garage, right? So it says "Down with my demons," and there's two hands, and it's got shackles between the two of them.
So I've had this hat for a while. I wear it a lot. It probably stinks, but it's
Can't smell it over the cigar smoke. So it's fine.
But when I found it, it just really spoke to me. I wear this hat. You can ask my fiance. I wear this hat all the time. But to me, the meaning of it is everyone has their demons. Everyone has something that maybe they aren't extremely proud of. But for me, I've come to terms with that. I've shook hands with it. And now I'm going to do what I need to do to live life doing something about those demons. So it's about just coming to terms that it's okay to, have some issues. Don't be afraid to talk about it. Don't be afraid to shake hands with it and then, do something about it.
And I'm going to ask another one because got you on the spot.
You're the host. You can.
For someone that deals with this on a daily basis at this point, you've had experience with it with your friends. I've had experience with unbeknownst to me, which I haven't talked about, that I do have a little bit of family history in this subject. I don't know if I told you that last time you were here. But have you, Dallas, ever dealt? We had Sean that actually, maybe you have, maybe you haven't. Have you dealt with these types of? Are you your own self motivation with some of this? Have you dealt with those demons before, or do you?
So I can't say that I've ever been suicidal.
Okay.
I have been in, and I don't know if it would necessarily be a diagnosis of depression, but I have been depressed before. I have been in dark times like that. I do suffer from anxiety. So I think that goes a long way in helping me with what I do today, because I really can understand. And I might not understand your particular situation, but I've been through things similarly. I have, lost someone close to me by suicide. So when I'm talking with my family members, I'm very empathetic from the situation that they're speaking from. I let them know that there is hope, that you can, continue through life and be successful no matter the stuff that you've been through. So I can't say that I've been suicidal. I don't think I've been to that point yet. But I have been depressed. When I worked in my residential facility, I was surrounded by a lot of mental health, right? And it affected me pretty hard. It started to affect my relationships. It started to affect a lot of stuff that I had to open my eyes to. And so I've taken steps to get better myself. And so when I'm asking the people out there to say something, to do something about your mental health, it's coming from a place that I've been there and I did it. And I think I'm in a better place today because of it.
Appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
I would like to, and I appreciate all you guys listening to part 2 here. We've got several listeners on still. And Sean, thank you for sharing tonight. That was amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
I want to go down the panel here. I want to start with AJ, go to Nate, then I'll go, and then we'll end with Dallas on the closing remarks. So AJ, go ahead.
Well, I've been thinking about it for a while now, but I've got 4 closing remarks, but I'll be brief.
Are they bullet
I'll be
points?
brief.
Hang on, let me buy some more time.
Yeah, no.
Yeah,
They're bullet points. They're
Let me go
bullet
Are
reset
they
points.
the
bullet
router
points, or is
again.
each one an essay?
No, they're bullet points.
Do you have a whiteboard?
The first one is fuck. I have to stop bringing powerful individuals on when I come on because
No,
I
you
think
don't.
there's been, I think in the times that I've been on, there's been tears shed on 3 episodes at this point. The second aspect is my mantra in life is keep moving forward. Sometimes in order to quote unquote keep moving forward, you have to take a step back and actually reach out to those people. Reaching out to those professionals might be that forward motion that you need to fix things. Okay. Point 3 is you might be the reason that someone wakes up in the morning. You sending that text, you sending that GIF, the funny joke, the was thinking about you, things like that. You might be the reason that someone else wakes up in the morning. And the thing I'll close with is if you are having any sort of these kind of thoughts, key in on the reason you keep going. Key in on those people that might miss you. As if you go, key in on your son, your daughter, your wife, your friends, your coworkers, your buddies, the people you hang out with on the weekends. Focus on those people and understand that they would miss you immensely. It would hurt them to their core if you were gone the next day. That's my closing remarks.
Thank you. That's nice. Nate?
I'll start by echoing something that Steve said earlier about, if any of the listeners are going through something like that, like we're all here to be able to reach out to. We may not have the problems, we may not be able to fix it, but we're at least someone that's there to talk to you about it. And sometimes that's the biggest step is reaching out to someone and just having someone there to talk to you about it. We may not be counselors or psychologists, psychiatrists. We may not have, licenses and doctorates, but we can at least be there for you and support you and talk to you about that. Going into this topic, I'd looked up some statistics, and I can say just broadly that some of the people that this topic affects a lot are not necessarily the type of people you would expect, whether it be by age group, by ethnicity, or even by occupation. There are some very successful people. There are people that make very good money that are even more susceptible to this than other demographics. So this is not an issue that is isolated to it's not isolated to males or females. It's not isolated to certain occupations or, incomes, ethnicities. This is something that impacts everybody. So don't think that just because a friend of yours, is a certain sex, certain race, certain occupation that, they're all in the clear. Like, no, this can absolutely impact anyone. So just be there for those people, as well as if you're someone who deals with, those types of issues or those types of thoughts, find those people that are close to you, find those people in your circle that even if they're not able to necessarily help you get to the finish line, they're at least there to help you get started. And sometimes that's the biggest issue I think a lot of people have is starting the conversation. And you can start that conversation with anybody. And I think the 4 of us on this panel are people you can, at the very least, start that conversation with.
I agree. Thank you for that.
I will I'll take this based off what AJ said, what Nate said, what we've talked about in part 2. I have this kind of resounding theme, I feel like, especially in the more recent episodes. We talk about mental health. Tonight we're focusing on suicide, and fortunate enough to have someone that is a professional at this point. Last time we had you on, you have gone through this path to where you're at right now. And that was almost 2 years ago.
Yep.
I'm very interested what the next 2 years lead to for you, Dallas. I've also alluded to about the fact that, mental health, as much as I appreciate the attention to it and what is out there, this is something that when we talk about mental health, I don't want to say it's necessarily the root of a lot of the big issues that we have, but it always comes back to it. It's not about necessarily other aspects of what's going on, what's wrong with the world, what's wrong with the country, where you live, whatever it might be. It's easy to talk about that stuff. Quick fixes to eliminate this or change this. I loved and again, I said I adore that Dallas had said something that when I asked for the leading causes, very quick to say, I'm sure he could say, yes, statistically, leading causes are this. But it was very, very quickly deferred to. There is not one. Everything is different. Everyone is dealing with different things. I look at it from a perspective that what we can do, we don't do what you do, Dallas. We don't deal with this on a daily basis. This is what at this point, your life goal, your professional goal is at this point. And again, I can't wait to see what happens in the next 2 years, and the next 2 years, and the 10 years, and where your life leads, and what impact you have on this as you learn more and as you have a bigger impact on this aspect of life, just focused on suicide, let alone the other mental health things, is that I encourage everyone out there not to just focus on talking about mental health, not putting up an Instagram story. Don't stop there. But we don't all, again, do what Dallas does. So my reoccurring theme that I've had for a little while now is that I get a little bit tired of the armchair quarterback of what the cause is that I'm going to post today. I'm more concerned about the feelings of absolute strangers, not only in my neighborhood, but also in countries that aren't even, I'm not saying these aren't valid things. Don't get me wrong here, but my efforts are based on people I've never met, but I believe in something. The biggest impact that I feel like that I can have, that everyone else can have on your day-to-day life is you start with your household and you branch out from there. I am, again, I don't know the right word. I'm frustrated that a lot of the effort from everyday people to the politicians to the media and everything else is very much focused on people that aren't in your everyday life. It's about feelings of people you've never met. And the consequence of that is that your own household is falling apart. You're falling apart. The people that are your friends are falling apart because you spend your energy focused on people that you will never meet because you feel like I have this cause. And in this case, mental health. I love the fact that Dallas is here tonight, focusing on postvention, hoping for prevention. He's focused on things that are actually happening to people that come across his desk. And I say that not in I'm not demeaning that. It's just something that it's like, this is what your effort is. This is the structure of how you're doing this. But it's like, if you can't focus on people in your life and give that moment to text them, to call them, to reach out if you're struggling, and all you do is you post Instagram story, Facebook, you watch the Twitter feed, and all you're doing is like, yes, if we could fix mental health, we would be able to do this because this happened in like 8 states away or 3 countries away or whatever it is. It's like, what the fuck's happening in your house? How did you wake up this morning?
Right.
How did your spouse, significant other, how did your kids, how are they dealing with it? Don't let other things trigger that all of a sudden you reflect in. Like, use that so that now you focus on how can I do better with my people, with myself, my household, my inner circle, the next circle out and branch out. That's the change, I think, that is really something that we can all do, myself included, that you give attention, because if more people did that, then the people that you never met, their inner circles that they touch are reaching out to them. You'll never reach someone halfway across the world. You can. I agree. Like, you know, like Sean, you had the person that walked, you know, your friend, we talked about the friend that walked around for a cause the entire world. And that is a very impactful thing that he dedicated his life in the last several years to do. But it's like, I would rather people, if you're not going to dedicate your entire life to it, focus on the people that you dedicate your life to, so that you can be there for them and they can be there for you. And the hope is that, again, people across the world are doing the same thing. That's the whole tribal part of it. You take care of your people. And then the greater effort, everyone taking care of their people and yourself first, not in a selfish way. But now that's the change. That's the real thing. It's not just fucking talking about it. It's literally just, you are impacting your life and the people that are in your life. And then hopefully more people will do that. You don't have to reach out for a social cause that you will never be in that country. You'll never be in that environment. You inspire through your effort in your own life. Dallas.
So you guys all had great points. And I really appreciate you guys being engaged with the conversation. Sean, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you getting on the mic and sharing what you did today. Super courageous of you. I appreciate that. I want to end with that suicide is a complex issue that cannot be addressed alone. So I challenge any listener, any viewer to educate yourself on what your part can be. Be open to having these conversations. Look into these trainings that I talked about, QPR. It's free. Just Google it. You can attend these trainings for free. So I challenge you to really dig deep within yourself and do something about this global pandemic that I think suicide is, in my opinion. I think once we do that, we can really grab hold of this and really do something about it. And I really do feel that we will see a decline in suicide fatalities in our community, in our state, in our nation, in the world. And then I also want to end with that we shared a lot of heavy stuff today. So if whether you're a listener or you're a viewer, you're here today, I just want to say, make sure we're doing some type of self-care. Make sure we're taking care of ourselves, because it's hard to help others if we don't, take care of ourselves. So leaving today, just make sure you decompress in some way before you put your head on the pillow.
It's heavy stuff.
Yes. And then if you're, if you listen later on the podcast, just make sure after listening, you just do something to decompress, because it is very heavy stuff. It's hard to talk about. It's an emotional thing, but it needs to happen. So I appreciate you guys being here. So thank you.
Guys, still say it. Happy Whiskey Wednesday.
AJ had an empty glass.
Good tech. I got a little laugh.
It's like it was his first time.
AJ, thank you very much for the bottle in part one. Dallas, thank you for being a part of this again.
Thank you for having me.
Like I said, I will say it again. I'm excited to see that hopefully before then, but in 2 years again, what you've done and where all this has gotten to. So guys, thank you very much for tuning in. Make sure you share, like, and spread the word. Thank you guys very much. Happy Whiskey Wednesday. Enjoy your week. We will see you next week.